So we should explore the connections between functionalism and feminist theory from a historical perspective so that we can understand perhaps how feminist theory and the women's movement in America have developed. Now remember that functional theory is always attempting to determine the basis of social solidarity. The answer to those two key questions with regard to functional theory: how do we exist in a state of balance or equilibrium, always seeking for things to work well together? And how do we change? A slow, methodical, evolutionary process. So functional theorists would say that we have interactions due to the obligations we feel towards one another. We have these social ties that bind us together and that cause us, in some respects, to behave in a certain way towards perfect strangers. And so one of the early developments with regard to functional theory and gender was the notion of the division of labor. And there have been two theorists who've done a lot of work in this area. The first of those was Emile Durkheim, and the second was Talcott Parsons. And we're going to use their work so that we can see how functionalists view gender, and moreover, how their view probably helped to craft our early ideas about feminist thought. So Durkheim didn't talk necessarily about gender, but he talked about this concept he called the division of labor, DOL. And he said that divisions of labor are good for society. He said that divisions of labor allow us to become specialists in our social roles. He said that divisions of labor allow society to function smoothly. And finally, we have to note that this is an important historical theory, historical development, and we still use division of labor theory today. All right, so what does division of labor mean? Well, that means that we have to have people who specialize in certain tasks in complex industrialized and post-industrialized countries. We can't do everything that is required every day on our own. So, for example, some of the simplest tasks that we have to accomplish every day, eating. I could probably, if I had to, grow my own food and perhaps even make my own bread, but it's much easier for me to rely on the baker and take my money and go to the bakery and buy the bread, or go to the grocery store and get groceries and then bring them home and cook them. It's even easier if I just go to a restaurant and let someone else prepare the food for me. Division of labor theories would say that this type of specialization, this differentiation of roles across a society, helps to keep us together. It provides a sort of network where we all have to learn how to work together, and we all have to appreciate, at least acknowledge, that other people are better at some things than we are. So when we're talking about Durkheim's division of labor, we're not necessarily talking about gender yet, but you can see how you could use division of labor theory in a gendered way. Men have certain roles, women have certain roles. Those roles are complementary. Which brings us to Talcott Parsons. Talcott Parsons takes Durkheim's work from the 1800s and builds on it in 1950s America. And he talks about a division of labor with regard to gender. Now he brings gender into the picture. Now you have to understand, again, historically and contextually, that the United States was in a period of time where political conservatism dominated our social life. Now remember, the basics of functional theory, all the parts of society have to work together. With regard to change, slow is good. This is a problem, however, because sometimes that change supports the status quo. It doesn't change quickly enough to be responsive to marginalized groups in society. And so here we find an emphasis on social order, and the dysfunctions of society will ease over time by adaptation to that order. And again, that's the primary criticism of functionalist theories in general. So once again, Parsons comes out and says divisions of labor are good for society. He also says that gendered divisions of labor are essential for the smooth functioning of society. And he comes up with, of course, a model. What else? Parsons has models for everything. That he calls instrumental and expressive roles. This is a family model that Parsons comes up with. Now, he's not talking necessarily here about individuals. He is, however, talking about how families should function in society. And here are his general observations. He says that men should take the instrumental role. These are rational decision-making roles. These are the money earners, and they are the public figures in the family model. That means that men should go out, have jobs, be social, and be out there in the public world. He says that the roles for women are expressive, nurturing, submissive. He says that women should be house managers and that they should be internal. It is not their job to be public. It is their job to be internal to the family. And he also goes farther than that and says, if a woman works outside the home, it is dysfunctional to the family model. And now in the contemporary world, while there are probably still some numbers of people who believe that this is the way a family should exist, and if it doesn't, there's something wrong, there's a problem, I think most of us would agree that this is an antiquated model, and that in today's contemporary world where we have many, many different models of the family, this can be a little bit problematic if we continue to stress that anything other than this type of family is dysfunctional. And we have to remember what life was like back in Parsons' time. Men did go out. Men did earn incomes outside of the home. They came home in the evening and the wife had the food on the table. This was called the golden era of America. And perhaps there are some numbers of us who look back on that time and think that things were better back in the day. We forget, however, that this period in time, and even today in many respects, groups continue to be marginalized. And so then women started to feel some discontent. They started to feel like their roles were not as valued or valuable as men's roles, and they started to push back against that, and that was what started the women's movement. So the basics of Durkheim and Parsons' theories lead us to gendered division of labor theories. These are types of evolutionary theories, and we can clearly see the implications for society. When you have theorists who are stepping out and saying women should be doing these things and men should be doing these things, and you place value on one role over another, of course you're going to get that backlash or that push back against those ideas, and that is what brings on a social movement. It is important for us to note that the modern women's movement, in particular the second wave of the feminist movement, also encouraged the civil rights movement, also encouraged the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and questioning movement. And all of these groups find their foundation in the same place. Not having equal access to social resources eventually leads to change in society. All right, I hope this helps. Take care.